Hey, what is up guys, MerganMan4 here, and we've almost reached the end of an era. This past Sunday, Easter Sunday, Legend of the Sea Devils aired, which is the penultimate episode of the Chibnall-Whittaker era, and actually one that was kind of added at the last minute, because originally this would have been the weekend that Jodie Whittaker's Doctor regenerated, until the BBC asked her and Chris Chibnall to stay on for an additional episode to celebrate the BBC centenary later this year. So I'm glad that we got an extra episode, and as always, it's great to have a new episode of Doctor Who, especially in another year where we're not going to have a full season. So yeah, I guess without further ado, why don't we get into Legend of the Sea Devils? So right off the bat, I want to say that going into this episode, I just love the premise of it. It had so many different elements working in its favor for me. Firstly, it's a historical story, and I love the historicals. I think they're one of the most fascinating things that Doctor Who does. I love delving into history, and the Chibnall era in particular, I've felt has produced some of the strongest and most interesting historical stories in the show's entire history. It's set in Asia, where hardly any of the show has been set. There's only really been a few across its 60 years that have had anything more than maybe a scene in Asia. And even then, those brief cameos are very few and far between. So I was very excited to be able to explore a little bit of Asian culture in the show, because it's so rare there. It's also a pirate story, which is another thing that's actually surprisingly been pretty rare. This is only the third time the show has done like a traditional pirate story, and so I was looking forward to that as well, because I love the whole pirate aesthetic, and I was excited to see that make a return in Doctor Who, especially since the previous two pirate stories, The Smugglers and The Curse of the Black Spot, I'm really not a fan of either of those. I think The Smugglers is the better of the two, but even then, I'd probably only give it like a 5 out of 10. So despite really enjoying the concept of pirates, I feel like they really haven't had a strong hit rate in the show. So I was looking forward to potentially having that fixed a bit. And not only that, it's the first time that the new series has done a new classic monster, so to speak, in almost a decade. I think the last ones were the Zygons in the 50th anniversary, unless you count like the brief cameo from the Movellans, which I don't. So yeah, this had a ton of stuff going for it, and I was really looking forward to seeing how it handles all of these elements. And especially, you know, looking at all the promotional materials, the images, the trailers, the aesthetic of it all, it just seemed to blend together so well. I loved having the Sea Devil imagery mixed in with the pirate imagery. It was the perfect match for me. And so going into this episode, it had a lot going for it, I found. A lot of things that I was excited to see. And unfortunately, it does fail to live up to its full potential. Now, saying that, I enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a very fun 50 minutes, and I've actually been surprised seeing just the amount of negativity online for it. I was not prepared for that at all. It's not a bad episode in my mind by any means, but it could have been so much more. And I think the main reason for that is because, as I mentioned earlier, it was a last-minute addition, probably scraping together whatever it could from the remaining budget, and you can really tell, which is very disappointing, but I mean, I do have no doubt that they tried the best with what they could do, and given the context, I still think they did a good job, but yeah, like I said, there's no denying that this could have been much, much better, and I think part of the problem is it feels like it lacks substance to it. Like, there's a lot of great stuff that's in here, a lot of stuff that I really like, but the episode just doesn't explore any of it in any real depth. It's just a light filler episode, and there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself, but it just means that it's impossible for it to ever be truly great. And so because of that, I really don't have a lot to say about the actual plot and story of the episode. It's mostly about the execution of it, and really, I think a lot of what I'm going to say is criticisms of the episode. That's probably going to be the dominant discussion here, which is a little bit contradictory to my feelings towards the episode, because like I said, I did end up really enjoying it in the end. But I just feel like there's not a lot I can say about the stuff that I liked. But I think when I'm giving these criticisms, I'm not approaching it from the perspective of this is why the episode is bad, more of this is why the episode isn't fantastic. You know, because like I said, it had a lot of stuff going for it, and it really could have been fantastic if you kept all those same elements. It was really just how it came together that was the problem. I think the biggest issue here is simply that the episode is too short. I mean, it doesn't feel like a short episode. Like, you're not watching it and being like, wow, it's over already. And it doesn't feel particularly overstuffed either. It feels like there's the right amount of stuff in it. But it just feels like there's just not enough time to explore any of it in any sort of depth. We're going from point A to point B to point C, and there's enough time for it to not feel rushed, but not enough for you to actually let it sink in, for it to actually have any major lasting effect. In fact, strangely, despite it being a special, it's actually, if not the shortest, certainly one of the shortest of the entire era. It's pretty much just a regular length episode, and while this isn't the first special that's below 60 minutes, most of them have been really close when they haven't reached that mark, either like 58 or 59 minutes. It's definitely the first special that isn't longer than a regular episode. And I think you can tell that the episode really needed more time to flesh everything out. An extra 10 or 15 minutes could have done wonders for this, I think. And it's most apparent in the editing. There's multiple scenes throughout the episode where it's blatantly obvious something has been cut. It's clear they were having some sort of production issues. I don't know what they might have been, but there was something going on and things were obviously removed. The most egregious, in my opinion, and probably the earliest example of it in the episode, is when the Doctor, Yaz, and Dan first encounter the Sea Devil, and they trap the Sea Devil in the net, but the net has come from nowhere. The Doctor's acting like they, had set up this plan, but there was no indication of that. It just came out of left field, and it's not the only moment like that in the episode. So the editing throughout was just really awkward, and I don't know if, the footage they took was just for some reason unusable, or they ran out of time to shoot everything they needed. Whatever the case, it does not flow well in the finalized episode, which is a real shame. Another issue I noticed too, that's probably connected to that, is there was quite a bit of ADR, additional dialogue recording in the episode, and also a lot of excessive exposition. I mean, I know it's a common complaint of the Chibnall era that there was a lot of exposition, and usually I don't mind it, to be perfectly honest. I don't normally really notice it, but in this episode I did, and if that's the case, it must have been particularly egregious. The one scene in particular that comes to my mind is when the Doctor and Yaz are on the ocean floor and it all falls out from underneath, and the Doctor's saying, oh, the ocean floor has disappeared. It's like, well, yeah, can't you see it? And she just goes on and on about it, even though we're seeing it happen right in front of us. It was weird. There's also the fact that two of the aspects that I was really looking forward to, I was rather underwhelmed by. Firstly, the historicals. Like I said, I think they've been a real highlight of the Chibnall era. I think they've been fascinating, and what I love about the historicals is learning things about history. This is the first historical of the era where that aspect didn't really come through for me. It just felt like the historical setting was there just as window dressing, And I didn't really feel like I learned anything about the time period. I didn't feel like I learned anything about Madame Ching, who was a real life person, a real pirate. And that was disappointing to me, because I think it's been a great strength of the other historicals in the Chibnall era. So, yeah, I mean, I enjoyed what we had. I enjoyed having the historical setting. I enjoyed Madame Ching as a character. They were fun to watch, but there wasn't really anything deeper there. And the same thing goes for the Sea Devils, which is another thing I think has been a big strength in the Chibnall era, the returning monsters. I think he has handled them excellently. He's given me my favorite take on the Master, some of the strongest takes on the Daleks, in my opinion. Ashad, the Lone Cyberman, is, in my opinion, one of the most unique things that the show has done with the Cybermen. The Sontarans and Flux are, in my opinion, their best outings since they were first introduced. The list just goes on, but here, I don't have a lot to say about the Sea Devils. I mean, I do have a lot to say about them in terms of their actual execution in design. I think they look fantastic. The perfect modern take on that original 70s design. It is gorgeous, and I love the little tweaks they made to it, the little bits of motion to the faces. The voices were great. So I loved all of that from a production perspective. I couldn't have asked for anything more there. But in terms of their actual role in the story, I mean, the Sea Devils fit. Like I said, they really fit the pirate aesthetic. It makes sense to have them if you're doing an aquatic villain. Their motivations line up with how they've been in the past, but there's not really any exploration of that. It's more just to drive the plot forward. There's not any sort of, emotional hook there like there has been in other Silurian or Sea Devil stories, with the fact that the Sea Devils and Silurians were the previous inhabitants of Earth. It's mentioned, but we don't dwell on it. And I do find it very strange that this is not a particularly political episode when the Sea Devils are rife for political commentary. Like, it's right there. And so I just found that very strange and disappointing, because, yeah, I feel like, despite the design being so excellent, and again, I did really enjoy seeing them back, the way they were written, it was underwhelming, unfortunately. It wasn't bad. It lined up with them from before. It just didn't really do anything interesting or unique with them. They were just, kind of Sea Devils, because why not? So that was a bit of a shame, in my opinion. Okay, so now I've got all that out of the way, I do want to talk about some of the other positives that I had with the episode, because, like I said, I am not meaning those criticisms in like a this is a terrible episode kind of way. Because despite all that stuff, I think the episode still has its highlights. For one thing, even though the CGI was admittedly a bit dodgy at times, the episode still manages to have some really gorgeous visuals at points. In particular, the image of the TARDIS being underwater, as well as actually the Doctor's little speech that goes along with that. I thought that was a beautiful moment and really just captures the raw wonder of Doctor Who. I also have to say, I thought the humor was really good in this episode. It stood out to me. Actually, it has ever since Series 13. I mean, I've always enjoyed the humor in the Chibnall era for the most part. There are still some things that haven't hit for me. But it's really gotten better since Series 13 onwards, and this is no exception. I think there are some hilarious lines here that got a real good laugh out of me. And then there is the elephant in the room, which is Thasmin, which obviously a lot of fans have been hoping for, asking for a while. I've previously expressed my thoughts that I have never been a fan of a Doctor companion romance. For me, the Doctor being in a romantic relationship with a human doesn't work for me. It didn't work with me with Ten and Rose, and I'm still not a huge fan of it now with 13 and Yaz. But ironically, despite that being the aspect that I was probably the least excited for going into this episode, I would say it's the best executed stuff here, especially the scene on the end with the beach. It was really well done, I thought. And, I mean, here's the thing. Like I said in Eve of the Daleks, I have no problem with Yaz having feelings for the Doctor. My issue more comes in with the Doctor having those romantic feelings for Yaz, and I was hoping, after Eve of the Daleks, that the Doctor would kind of let Yaz down gently, that she wouldn't reciprocate those feelings, and this episode seems to confirm that she does feel those feelings for Yaz, but I appreciate that they didn't go for, oh, well, now they both acknowledged it, they can be in a relationship together. They've kind of gone down the route of, I'd like to, but I can't. And I do think that's probably the next best thing, in my opinion, being someone who didn't want to see it in the first place. And I did think it was well executed. It makes sense for the character of the Doctor that she feels like she can't commit to any one person in the same way that she couldn't commit to, any one time or place. She's always on the move. She can't, stay still. That being said, it does seem kind of strange, like, that it's been... It feels like it's kind of been resolved here, with the Doctor asking if they can just, live in the present, and Yaz agreeing. So, I don't really know where it's going to go from here in the Centenary, and if it doesn't go anywhere, then I kind of feel like, well, then what was the point? You're taking this detour for 2 episodes, right? Like, I feel like it's going to have some major consequences in the Centenary special for it to actually make sense to have bothered introducing it. But I'm not really sure where they're going to go with it now, because if the Doctor, continues to feel this way, that she can't be in a relationship with Yaz, then it can't really develop further. But then the alternative is she changes her mind and she does reciprocate, which I suppose is a possibility. But then I'm going to be disappointed about that because I don't really want her to reciprocate. So, yeah, I guess it remains to be seen where they're going to go with that. But I will say, at the very least, I do appreciate that it's a different take to the ones we've had before. Because in previous Doctor Companion romances, they both reciprocated, or in Martha's case, the Doctor is completely oblivious and, doesn't have any sort of feelings whatsoever, because he very poorly treated Martha as basically just a Rose stand-in. So, at the very least, I do appreciate that this is a different take on that. But, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say about it. I did enjoy this special despite its issues, but I think what I will say about it is I liked mostly everything in it. It's just impossible to love any of it, which is kind of where the issue lies. So, I had a fun 50 minutes. I am really baffled by the people who've been acting like this is some awful episode. I've seen more than once people say it's like the worst episode since Orphan 55, which no way, man, not at all. I mean, at the very least, for me, I enjoyed it more than Eve of the Daleks. I do think it has more significant flaws, but I enjoyed it more. And yeah, it's not an episode that I'm necessarily going to be eager to revisit, but yeah, it's a fun enough time. That's all it is, really. It's not anything special, but it's entertaining, which is fine to have every once in a while. And I think people were expecting more because it is a special. But again, it was something that was added at the last minute, and I don't really think it's fair to place the expectations that it's going to be some massive episode just because it's a special. So I don't know, that doesn't really bother me that it ended up being more filler. And as for how it compares to the previous Sea Devil outings, it's miles better than Warriors of the Deep. And Here's a little thing. I know the original Sea Devil story is really popular. I've never cared for it that much. I mean, sure, it's solid, but I also don't think it's really anything special. Kind of similar to this story. Ultimately, I think I enjoy Legend of the Sea Devils more than the Sea Devils as an episode, but the actual Sea Devils themselves were definitely executed better than the original. So, there, I guess I'll leave it at that. But, one episode to go of the era, the Centenary Special, which, as of now, does not have a title. We're in for a lengthy wait, another 6 months before we get it, and from the teaser that was shown, it looks like it is going to be jam-packed, which, on the one hand, I'm very excited about what we're going to see. On the other hand, I'm concerned that Chibnall might not be able to pull it off. It better be a lengthy special because, I mean, we've got a lot going on. I was a little disappointed to see Daleks and Cybermen in it. That kind of made my heart drop a little bit because I'm like, why are you throwing them in too? You don't need them. Although, seeing a shot in the trailer, that perked me up. That intrigues me because he was obviously killed by the Master, who I am very excited to see back again. Like I mentioned earlier, it's my favorite take on the character, so I can't wait to see Sacha Dhawan back in the role. And then, of course, the massive reveal. Tegan and Ace are coming back, and, you know, I'm amazed it took this long for the show to bring back classic companions again, and I'm so happy they're doing it. This is where my main concern about it being overstuffed is, because that's something that deserves an episode all on its own, let alone with everything else that'll be going on here, but hopefully it can be pulled off. I'm especially excited to see Ace again, who is one of my all-time favorite companions. It feels so good to see them back, and I'm very excited for it. But, yeah, I guess that's all I have to say on the episode. Oh, I didn't give the episode a score yet. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. It's really, you know, really in the middle of the pack, I'd say. It's, you know, it's not great, but it's far from bad. It's an average episode. I'll say that. So, yeah, that was the 2022 Easter special, the penultimate episode of the Chibnall Whittaker era. And please leave your thoughts on the episode down in the comments below. And I guess I'll see you guys in 6 months with the conclusion to the 13th Doctor's era. And with that, Burgerman 4, over and out. And I'll see you guys later.